They say Port Corazon never truly sleeps. By day it is alive, the heat rising from the asphalt, the sound of pan echoing through narrow streets, and the voices of vendors calling out over the traffic. The city is full of movement, ambition, and noise. But when the sun dips behind the hills, Port Corazon exhales. The streets empty, the music fades, the rain begins to fall against zinc rooftops, and the wind moves through the narrow lanes like a whisper of secrets not meant to be told. And somewhere within those shadows lies the story of Justice Lionel Ramsey, a man who gave his life to the law, and of Alicia Lewis, the young woman who became its sacrifice. Justice Lionel Ramsey was a man both admired and feared. In the courtroom, his voice carried weight. Every sentence he delivered was measured, deliberate, and final. The people called him the Iron Judge, not out of affection, but out of reverence for the firmness with which he ruled. He lived in a large old house perched above the savannah. It was a quiet place, filled with books, the ticking of an antique clock, and the faint scent of cedar from the furniture he had owned for decades. When his sister died unexpectedly, leaving behind her only daughter, he took the girl in without hesitation. Her name was Alicia Lewis, bright, kind, and soft-spoken. She filled the house with laughter, a sound the judge had not heard in many years. By the time she turned 23, Alicia had grown into the kind of woman who carried light with her wherever she went. She worked at a travel agency in the city, loved coffee sweetened with condensed milk, and wore her mother's gold pendant every day. To her uncle, she was more than family. She was his peace in a world that had forgotten mercy. It was December of 1999. The island pulsed with the sound of Christmas preparations, distant parang music, the smell of sorrel brewing on stoves, the laughter of children chasing each other through the narrow streets. That Friday night, Alicia attended a co-worker's birthday dinner in St. Clair. She left just after 9, waving goodbye as she stepped out into the cool night air. She wore a yellow dress, her hair tied back, her perfume soft but lingering, jasmine and something faintly floral. She promised to call her uncle once she reached home. But somewhere between the laughter of her goodbyes and the stillness of the road ahead, darkness began to follow her. Once, Sergeant Darren Ramnarine had been a good officer. He joined the police force at 21, disciplined, ambitious, proud of the uniform he wore. For years he served faithfully, patrolling the same neighborhoods that had raised him, driven by a belief that justice was pure and that the system he worked for would protect those who did right. But the years changed him. He watched as men less competent rose faster through the ranks because of connections or corruption. He watched cases vanish from files, evidence disappear, and criminals walk free because someone higher up had been paid. And when he finally decided to speak against it, it was Justice Ramsey who presided over the hearing that ended his career advancement. From that day forward, bitterness took root. What began as resentment became obsession, not just with the judge, but with everything he represented. So when a younger constable named Aaron Roach approached him one evening with a plan, a way to make easy money and settle old debts, Darren Ramnarine listened. The rain had started earlier that night. By the time Alicia left the dinner, the roads were slick with water. She drove slowly, the wipers clicking back and forth, the sound of the radio filling the car with soft music. She didn't know that a white panel van had been following her from the moment she left the city. Inside sat 3 men, Darren Ramnarine, Aaron Roach, and a petty criminal named Devon, who had been promised a share of the ransom for helping. Their plan was simple: intercept the girl, take her somewhere quiet, call the judge, demand money, and release her unharmed. But desperation never stays within its own limits. Near the old Arangas bypass, the van pulled ahead of her, cutting across the road. The hazard lights blinked in the darkness, and two figures stepped out into the rain. Alicia slowed. She saw the faint gleam of what looked like police jackets, flashlights in their hands. "Good evening, miss," Roach said through the window, his tone calm, professional. "We're conducting a routine check. Please step out of the vehicle." Relieved, Alicia smiled. "Of course, officer. Is something wrong?" Then she saw him, the man standing behind them, half in shadow. The rain dripped from the brim of his cap. Even in the dim light, she recognized the face. "You," she whispered. "You used to work with my uncle." For a brief moment, Ramnarine hesitated. Something, guilt perhaps, flickered across his face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Get her out of the car," he said quietly. When Alicia realized what was happening, panic set in. She reached for her door lock, but Roach grabbed the handle and forced it open. "Please," she pleaded, "whatever this is." Her voice was drowned out by the rain. There was a struggle, hands pulling, feet slipping on wet asphalt, her screams piercing through the storm. In the chaos, Ramnarine struck her, not out of rage, but out of panic. She fell silent instantly. The three men stood frozen, breathing heavily. "She's not dead," Roach said, kneeling beside her. But her pulse was faint, her skin pale beneath the rain. They lifted her into the van. The engine started and the night swallowed them whole. They drove aimlessly for almost an hour before Ramnarine spoke again. His voice was quiet, steady, the tone of a man who had stopped hoping for redemption. "We can't go back now," he said. Roach stared at him. "We can take her to a hospital." Ramnarine turned sharply. "And tell them what? That we kidnapped a judge's niece?" No one spoke after that. The van wound its way through the back roads toward the hills of Valencia. Dense, isolated terrain. The kind of place where no one asked questions. Under the cover of rain and darkness, they stopped near an abandoned quarry. Using a single flashlight, they dug a shallow hole at the edge of the bush. When it was done, Ramnarine stood over it, his expression unreadable. No one said a word. 3 weeks later, the rain had returned, soft and steady, as it always did that time of year. A farmer named Daniel Pierre had been clearing his hillside plot early one morning when he noticed a stray dog scratching at the earth near a thicket. At first, he thought little of it, but when he went to chase the animal away, he saw something glint beneath the soil, a fragment of yellow fabric. Curiosity turned to dread. He called for help. Within hours, police tape lined the area. The body was found half buried, her features blurred by time and rain, but her clothing still recognizable. The yellow dress that once brightened a dinner party now lay torn and faded against the mud. It didn't take long for the judge to arrive. He stood under the umbrella of another officer, silent, unmoving. The rain slid down his coat, down his face, but his expression never changed. "You can bury her body," he said softly, "but not her name." For weeks, investigators worked tirelessly. The nation was outraged. A judge's niece kidnapped and killed, allegedly by men wearing the same uniform, sworn to protect her. A tip from a retired officer eventually led detectives to a small house in the Southern District, where Roach had been staying. Inside, they found evidence that tied him to the crime, a pair of handcuffs issued by the service, and most damning of all, Alicia's gold pendant hidden inside a drawer. When questioned, Roach broke down. He confessed everything: the plan, the accident, the burial. His confession led police directly to Darren Ramnarine. Ramnarine was arrested at his home in the early morning hours. His uniform hung neatly pressed in his wardrobe, the same one he once wore with pride. When the officers told him the charges, He simply said, "Justice never had mercy for me. Why should I have any for it?" The trial drew the attention of the entire island. Newspapers called it a betrayal in blue. The courtroom was packed each day, the air heavy with anger and disbelief. Justice Ramsey sat in the gallery, his hands clasped, his face pale but composed. The evidence was overwhelming. Phone records placed Ramnarine near the scene. The van had been traced back to a vehicle impound yard, registered under his name. Roach's confession sealed the case. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, there was no applause, no sense of victory. The silence was louder than any gavel. Ramnarine was sentenced to 17 years. Roach received 15. The third man, Devon, turned witness and disappeared shortly after the trial. Years passed. The newspapers stopped printing her name. The trial faded into memory. But on rainy nights, taxi drivers still claimed to see a white van parked by the old road through Arangues. Headlights off, wipers moving, no driver in sight. And some say that if you drive past it slowly, you can hear a faint voice calling from within, soft, distant, and broken. "Uncle Lion, I'm coming home." Others say that in the courthouse downtown, where Justice Ramsey once sat in judgment, the night guards still hear footsteps echoing down the corridor after midnight. Sometimes they swear they see her, a young woman in a yellow dress, standing by the window, staring out at the rain, waiting for it to stop. Justice Ramsey never returned to the bench. He spent his final years in quiet solitude, his once sharp eyes dulled by grief. He died in that same house on the hill overlooking the city, the yellow dress folded carefully in a box beside his desk. And every so often, when thunder rolls across the savannah and the rain drifts against the windows, neighbors say they can still hear the faint sound of a woman's laughter carried in the wind. Because in the Caribbean, stories like this do not die. They linger, in the sea, in the rain, in the quiet between heartbeats. They remind us that justice, no matter how righteous, has a shadow. And sometimes, that shadow wears a badge. The stories are real. The events, they truly happened. Only the names and locations have been changed to protect the privacy of those still living and the memories of those who did not survive. In the Caribbean, truth often hides in the shadows, but no matter how deep the darkness runs, the echoes of justice always find their way back.